Hello everyone, and welcome to the ArcGIS Data Reviewer Technical Workshop for this year's user conference. My name is Caleb McNeil, and presenting with me today is Kumar Gaurav. Moderating the live Q&A at the end will be Francisco Perez. We are product engineers on the Data Reviewer product development team here in sunny Redlands, California. And in case you hear any barks in the background, I'd also like to introduce you to my new puppy, Indy. She mostly naps, but can get pretty excited about data quality control workflows. With multiple workshops occurring in this slot, I'd like to be upfront about what you will take away from this session. First, I'll give you an overview of Data Reviewer's attribute rule capabilities, which encompass the next evolution of our functionality. Second, Kumar will show you some demonstrations of how attribute rules can be configured and used to meet your real-world data quality requirements. And finally, I'll identify resources that can be used to get you up and running with Data Reviewer after the conference. To achieve these goals, topics we'll be covering include an overview of the Data Reviewer extension, an introduction to attribute rules and how we tie into them. We'll discuss automated and semi-automated review workflows, error management and correction, the importance of error reporting, and finally, we'll wrap up with some resources about our product. After the workshop, we'll be having a 15-minute live Q&A session. As such, we encourage you to submit your questions in the chat throughout the workshop so that we can answer as many of them as possible. There will also be a couple of live polls during the session, so keep an eye on the chat to participate in them. So to start, I'll quickly go over a bit about our product, ArcGIS Data Reviewer. The ArcGIS Data Reviewer extension provides a unified set of capabilities to standardize and automate your data quality control process. It provides ways to simplify and improve data quality workflows that will enable an efficient and consistent review process to increase GIS data quality and to reduce risk. It will help decrease data management costs by automating the detection of errors using data validation checks. It also allows engagement between data consumers by implementing reporting tools to provide feedback on poor data quality. So some of you may be familiar with using Data Reviewer in many different areas of ArcGIS. However, the attribute rules workflows that I'll be discussing today are available on ArcGIS Pro for our desktop users and ArcGIS Server's validation service for our enterprise customers. On these platforms, our extension is baked in, meaning you're only a license away from accessing some of the functionality that I'll be talking about today. Now, I want to give you an overview of attribute rules and how Data Reviewer extends this technology to simplify data quality management. So attribute rules are user-defined rules that are configured for simple features using Esri's arcade scripting language. They ensure quality assurance as well as quality control of GIS data. So in other words, they implement data quality standards during data creation and maintenance. They help in enforcing GIS data integrity, and they are defined in feature classes or tables and are persisted as part of the geodatabase. And as such, they are envisioned to be supported across ArcGIS. There are three main types of attribute rules. We have constraint rules, which restrict inserts and modifications to feature classes and tables. Calculation rules, which provide an automated way to populate feature attributes. And finally, we have validation rules. They help in the process of quality control by running validation on existing data. So for our workshop today, I'll be focusing on constraint and validation rules. As Kumar will demonstrate to you in a minute, Data Reviewer attribute rules provide users with an easy way to streamline their quality needs with out-of-the-box data checks that provide predefined data validation methods that assess a feature's quality. They assess different aspects of a feature's quality that include integrity, geometric properties, as well as a feature's spatial relationship with other features. They are easily configurable as there is no need for customers to create custom arcade scripts, and they are supported in both constraint and validation workflows. To illustrate this, let's say that my organization has a business rule that my road centerline features must not contain cutbacks of greater than 45 degrees. Now, to implement this with standard attribute rules, first I would need to develop an arcade script that would find these cutbacks in my feature. Then I would plug my script into an attribute validation rule and perform a lot of testing to ensure that my script correctly finds the error condition. If I'm successful, I would also need to maintain the script to ensure that future arcade updates don't impact my work. With Data Reviewer, all I need to do is choose our out-of-the-box cutbacks validation check, enter a few parameters, and save it. All of the testing, development, and maintenance tasks are handled for you, saving you time and effort. So now that we've learned a bit about how Data Reviewer has built upon attribute rules, I'll discuss how to implement them within an automated review workflow. Automated review is the ability to evaluate a feature's quality using validation methods that assess different properties of a feature. Very little human interaction is required, so this is the fastest and least expensive form of quality control. First, we'll talk about attribute validation rules. Typically, this form of data validation is used to assess the quality of features that already exist in your database. This can be useful when establishing a baseline understanding of a dataset's fitness for use. In addition, validation rules can be run regularly to ensure data integrity over time. Automated review can also be used to validate features on creation or modification using constraint rules. This can be useful in data production environments where data is changing through time and you want to prevent the creation of poor quality data. Constraint rules can be triggered during insert, update, or delete operations during the editing process, preventing errors from getting into your data environment. Implementing Data Reviewer attribute rules is typically a three-step process. First, you would identify and document your data quality requirements. Now, these typically come from sources such as industry standards or subject matter expertise and are documented in your organization's quality assurance plan. After the requirements are established, you need to select which Data Reviewer check would satisfy these requirements. The Data Reviewer checks poster is a great place to compare the functionality of each check. And finally, you would consider whether a constraint or validation workflow would best suit your requirements. Now, Kumar will demonstrate how Data Reviewer attribute rules are configured using the ready-to-use rules gallery.
Thanks, Caleb. In this demo, I'm going to talk about how requirements are translated using Data Reviewer checks that implement quality assurance in the data management workflows. For this demo, we have 4 data requirements that will be addressed using Data Reviewer attribute rules. So the first requirement is residential building area must be between 500 and 4,000 square feet. This requirement applies only to the residential building features which are stored in building polygon feature class. The wording of the requirement indicates that an error condition exists when residential building feature measure less than 500 or greater than 4,000 square feet in size. By examining the Data Reviewer check poster, we can see that evaluate polygon perimeter area check can be used to fulfill this requirement. And we will implement this rule in both constraint and validation workflows. Moving on to the next requirement we have, site address point should be within a building footprint. Unlike the first requirement, this requirement references 2 data sources, site address point and building polygons. And given how the requirement is worded, an error condition exists when a site address point feature is not located within a building polygon. We can repeat the same exercise and identify the relevant check, which is feature on feature check in this case. Similarly, for our other 2 requirements, we can use query attributes and domain checks. So let us proceed to author our checks. In ArcGIS Pro, you can see that I have already loaded my data into a map. So first, I will locate the participating feature class, which in this case is building footprint, and then I'm going to right click, and from the design menu, I will select attribute rules. This will open attribute rules view, where attribute rules are managed. The attribute rule view displays the rules configured for either a feature class or standalone table stored in a geodatabase. To author an attribute rule using Data Reviewer, click on the Ready to Use Rules button to display a smart gallery of checks. This is a smart gallery because it will only display checks pertaining to the selected data source. For example, when authoring rules for a polygon feature class, the gallery will auto-populate the checks that are supported with polygon features. From the gallery, click the required check and it will be added to the attribute rules view. And it will display a pane where you will configure the checks parameter. For this demo, I have already configured all my rules to save time. But I'm going to explain all the parameters that I used in those checks. So the first requirement is implemented using the evaluate polygon perimeter area check, which will be used to evaluate the area of the building footprint features and flag those features as error when its area is out of the specified limits. Optionally, it can also be used to evaluate area and parameter of individual parts in a multi-part feature. Each rule has a unique name, which can be used to identify the intended purpose of the rule. The description parameter can be used to provide additional information about errors that result from the rule. This can include notes to guide corrective action or other helpful information. Validation attribute rules also contain a severity parameter, which can be used to communicate the impact errors of this type represent. The tag parameter can be used to facilitate traceability of rules to quality requirements. The next requirement is addressed using a domain check. This check is used to identify features that contain attribute values which are inconsistent with an associated domain. For this requirement, we are evaluating attributes from the owner type field to find any inconsistencies. Our last rule configured on this feature class uses query attribute check that detects feature which contains an invalid attribute value. For this requirement, we are finding null values in the building ID field. We have also implemented our first requirement in a constraint workflow. You can see nearly all the check parameters are same, except the severity parameter, which is replaced with triggers. Since constraint rules are used to restrict editing operation, we can specify which action will trigger the check, such as an insert, an update, or delete action. In our case, we have configured the rule to assess features when they are first inserted into the geodatabase. For requirements related to site address point features, we have configured the feature on feature check to implement a rule on site address point feature class to identify any such address points which are not within building footprints. The feature on feature check is used to find features that have specific special relationship either between two different layers or within the same feature layer. This check is authored on the data source, which should be marked as an error when a specified relationship exists with features configured in the features to compare parameter. So I have added this check on site address point feature class and used building footprints feature class as the feature to compare. Please note that you can also provide a filter to limit the number of features in the features to compare data source. The special relationship parameter will show you different options that you can use based on the type of feature classes used. For this requirement, I have selected the within special relationship and enabled the invert parameter to identify site address features that are not within building footprints. Optionally, you can also add an attribute relationship to compare the attributes of those features which have a special relationship to one another. So just to summarize this demo, we learned how to implement your new quality requirement using Data Reviewer attribute rules in your management workflows.
Thanks, Kumar. Now I'll talk about how Data Reviewer attribute rules work in an automated workflow, followed by some of our semi-automated review tools. Data reviewers automated review capabilities fit into three broad categories to assess different aspects of a feature's quality. These include automated methods that enable you to find problems with attributions in features. So for example, identifying features with an invalid combination of attributes. There are also methods for validating the basic integrity of a feature. So for example, if a feature's size is below or above a certain threshold, as Kumar demonstrated. And finally, there are checks for validating spatial relationships between features. So for example, finding features which overlap one another or contain gaps between other features. As of ArcGIS Pro 2.8, Data Reviewer offers 16 different check configurations, with more being added at each release. These include attribute-based checks, like using query attributes to find features whose attribution meet a specific query, or ensuring your street road names in one feature match values in an authoritative table using table-to-table attributes. We also have spatial relationship-based checks, like the feature-on-feature check that Kumar demonstrated, or using duplicate features to find duplicate geometry with identical attribution, such as a duplicate housing parcel. And finally, we offer feature-based checks, such as detecting duplicate vertices in polyline features or ensuring that elevation values ascend or descend monotonically. While most checks are general purpose and used across many different industries, we also have checks like Event and Event that are designed specifically for our customers using linear referenced systems. So once your rules are authored, you can take full advantage of our automated workflows. Validation rules can be scheduled to evaluate your data as frequently as you need, and keep a record of any changes in data quality that may occur between evaluations. This allows you to track data integrity over time with minimal human interaction. In addition, constraint rules will consistently prevent certain types of edits from being performed on your data, adding an additional level of protection against poor data quality from entering into your production environment to begin with. For more information on implementing an automated review process, you can check out our ArcGIS Pro documentation. Here, you will find a flowchart that will walk you through different implementations depending on your data environment. So now we'll discuss semi-automated review workflows. Semi-automated review is a form of data validation built around guided workflows that require human interaction and input. Examples of these include methods that identify missing, misplaced, or miscoded features, and the assessment of a feature's positional accuracy. Since people are a part of the process, these methods can be subjective, since people with different backgrounds and experiences may make decisions differently. Visual review is by far the most commonly used method of this type. This is the process of manually reviewing data to assess its quality in ways that automated review cannot or was not set up to do. This may involve a general inspection of the data and sometimes can include a comparison with another data source, such as an updated imagery. The person performing the review is using some level of judgment discretion in the review, so they need to have good knowledge of the quality requirements and the ability to make decisions in a consistent manner. To help facilitate semi-automated review, we'll talk about the Flag Missing Feature tool as well as the Browse Features tool. The Flag Missing Feature tool is a tool that allows users to bring attention to missing features that validation tools might not have caught. This tool creates an error record where the feature is missing, allowing data editors to quickly address the issue. Browse Features allows users to walk through their features and error geometry to visually inspect their correctness. This tool is typically used on a representative sample of your data to ensure that the rule configurations you've implemented are capturing their intended results. Now, Kumar will demonstrate how validation rules are evaluated, as well as the semi-automated review tools that I just mentioned.
Now that we have created attribute rules to assess the quality of our data, we can now leverage automated capabilities found in ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Enterprise to identify features which do not meet our quality requirements. First, we will add error layers to the map by right-clicking on a feature class that contains attribute validation rules and selecting Add Error Layers option from the right-click context menu. These layers contain the error features created when your data is evaluated using either attribute batch calculation or validation rules and enable error inspector functionality in our map. Next, we will open the error inspector by navigating to the edit ribbon and clicking the error inspector command located in the manage edits group. This will open the error inspector pane, which will facilitate attribute rule execution as well as displaying any resulting error information. To evaluate the quality of features in our project, we first need to ensure that our project area is displayed in the map. I will then configure the setting of the evaluate rule tool to control how evaluation occurs. These settings include the ability to select the type of rule to evaluate as well as the feature to be evaluated. Next, we will click the evaluate rules command and wait for the evaluation to complete. During evaluation, features in the map extent which require validation are tested using the checks created in the previous demonstration. Features that fail validation are written to the error layers and include such information such as a description of the error condition, when the error was discovered, and by whom. We will cover error features in greater detail in the next section. Please note, there are other ways as well to execute validation rules. You can use Evaluate Rule GP tool in ArcGIS Pro or use it in a script if you want to automate this action. If you're working with branch version feature services, then you can also use Evaluate REST endpoint to execute validation rules. Now that we have leveraged automated workflows that detect features which do not meet our quality requirements, we will now focus on tools for conducting a semi-automated review of our data. In ArcGIS Pro, Data Reviewer offers two tools for semi-automated review for data quality: Browse Features and Flag Missing Features. The Browse Feature tool is used to navigate through a selection of features to compare them against another authoritative data source, such as recent aerial survey to identify errors. Any inconsistencies that are observed can be logged as an error specifying the necessary corrective action for your organization's editor. Similarly, the Flag Missing Feature tool is used to generate errors in an area where features are missing. Both tools empower the users to supplement their automated review workflows with context-specific errors and corrected input. To use Browse Feature tool, I'm going to select a subset of features that I'm going to evaluate. I will go to the Edit ribbon and then select Manage Quality to open Manage Quality ribbon. From here, I can select Browse Features. And after they are selected and populated within the Browse Feature pane, I can clear my selection. And finally, I can use the arrows to navigate through my different features. Once I found a possible error, such as this building footprint being offset from the satellite imagery, I can select an error type such as Move Features, and then I can add some notes and severity for edit team. Finally, I click Commit to generate the error. Now, let's say if you notice a missing feature that you want to alert your editors, such as this building is missing a site address point. The Flag Missing Feature tool can be used to add such errors to your error management system. To use this tool, first we will select the missing feature class, in this case the site address point, and then click on the Flag Missing Feature dropdown to enter error type, notes, and severity. And then we will click the Flag Missing Feature button. Navigate to the missing feature within our map and click to add the error to our reviewer workspace. To summarize this demo, we have seen how we can perform automated and semi-automated validation using Data Reviewer provided tools and attribute rules. Back to you, Caleb.
Thanks, Kumar. Next, we'll talk about the error results generated by evaluating your validation rules. As Kumar demonstrated, errors are generated when a feature meets the conditions of your validation rules. After evaluating your rules, the reviewer errors will populate in the error inspector. These rules are stored as features directly in your geodatabase. They contain information about the error and its associated features, so this includes the source layer, the object ID of the feature or row in error, the rule name, and much more. They are directly linked to the feature associated with the error record, and they use a defined lifecycle that tracks whether the error has been addressed or not. As I mentioned, error records are stored as layers in your geodatabase based on the type of error geometry being generated. They are comprised of 3 feature classes in one table. So this includes a feature class for polyline error geometry, one for polygon error geometry, one for point error geometry, and a table for non-spatial errors. Data Reviewer provides a framework for you to manage errors through a defined lifecycle. Typically, there are 3 stages. As error features are created during rule evaluation, they enter the workflow in a review state. In the correction phase, Data Reviewer aids by recording details of who, when, and how these errors were resolved. In a future release, we will be adding the ability to add exceptions to error conditions returned by a rule that your organization has deemed acceptable. In the final phase, errors that have been successfully corrected and deemed acceptable enter the verify state. Attribute rules automatically complete this step by determining whether an error in the review state has been corrected or not. However, if a corrective edit still doesn't comply with the rule violation, it remains in the review state for further corrective action. To better illustrate the lifecycle process, let's say that you have executed some validation rules on your data for the first time. As errors are generated, they are placed in the review state to denote that an error condition is present. Corrective edits are then performed on the features in error to fix the underlying problem. Once the editing is complete, the validation rules are reevaluated to assess whether the errors have been successfully corrected. If the edit corrects the error violation, then the error record automatically moves into the verify state, denoting that it has been resolved. However, if the edit was unsuccessful at correcting the error violation, it remains in the review state for further editing. Now, Kumar will demonstrate the error lifecycle in an editing workflow, along with constraint rules to limit certain editing operations.
Thanks, Caleb. In this demo, we are going to cover correction and management of attribute rule errors. Before we dive in our demo, I will briefly give you an overview of the validation attribute rule workflow. It starts with contributors who create or update data either through a rich desktop client such as ArcGIS Pro, a web application, or a mobile device in a connected environment. These edits result in dirty features. Using the evaluate operation, contributors evaluate these dirty features to either calculate attribute values or validate their quality. The validation process runs all enabled rules on dirty features where the following work is performed. First, all features which are identified as dirty will be updated as clean features which no longer require validation. Second, all features that have been identified as errors will be updated or inserted as error features in the error inspector, which is the traditional data reviewer workflow in validation. Lastly, and more importantly, validation process will identify all existing errors that are no longer invalid and auto-verify those errors by updating the error status of these features, which I'll talk more about in a few minutes. The remaining errors as well as newly identified errors are available to contributors and other stakeholders for correction or reporting purposes, making this a cyclical workflow. So now let's proceed to our demo. In ArcGIS Pro, you can see that we have the error inspector open and the map extent set to the same area we executed our validation rule against in the last demo. This evaluation found some new errors that I will use to perform corrective editing actions. For the purpose of this demo, I will only fix these two errors that are currently displayed in the error inspector. The error inspector provides both special and attribute information pertaining to the error results. Here, the editor can access the necessary corrective action to fix the error, including its source layer, feature object ID, as well as name, rule description, and severity. The corresponding error geometry can easily be found by right-clicking the far left column of the error inspector and selecting the Zoom to, Pan to, Flash, or the Select option. In addition, the editor can mark the error as an exception to the validation rule in accordance with their data requirements. Now, we will address a feature that has violated query attribute validation rule we authored earlier. For corrective action, looking at the error inspector, we are reminded to look for a null value in building ID field. First, I'll select the feature and then open the attribute pane. Notice how the feature validation status is set to no calculation required, no validation required, has errors, which reflects that we have just executed our rules and an error was found. We'll come back to this in a minute. Now, I will provide a value to the building ID. After making my edits, I'll go back to the validation status and we can see that it is changed to validation required. This ensures that the rule will be executed again on this feature to pick up our edits. Looking at the description to the next error in Error Inspector, we can see that this error is caused by a missing building feature. So let's add a building feature to resolve this issue. To add a building footprint feature, I'll go to the Edit ribbon and select Create from Features group. From the Create Features pane, I will select Building Footprint Template and try to place it on a site address point. Note how the editing operation failed and an error is visible in the Create Feature pane showing you the cause of the error. This was generated from a constraint rule which requires building polygon area to be in a certain limits. Constraint rules are a useful tool to ensure inappropriate editing operations don't jeopardize the quality of the underlying data. So close the error message, create a valid polygon, and click to finish the edit. Next, I will reevaluate rules using my visible extent. After it is finished executing, you will notice some changes. First, review phase changed from reviewed to verified for the errors. And looking at the features attribute, we will see the validation status has changed from validation required to no validation required. These changes confirm that the error has been corrected while maintaining a record of the error for reporting purposes. So to summarize this demo, we have seen how validation status field plays an important role in data validation. Any editing operation on our data will change the validation status field, based on which a feature is either passed or picked for the evaluation. Review phase of any error is also decided by this field. Back to you, Caleb.
Thanks, Kumar. Now we'll discuss the importance of error reporting. Using error results, we can answer some basic questions regarding your data's quality. These include, does poor quality data impact my entire data set or just a specific location? How severe are the errors relative to the use of my data? Are there systematic errors in my data, or are there many different types of errors that might require different skill sets to correct? Are certain data sources more prone to errors than others? And finally, how much of the corrective work has already been completed and what remains? By analyzing errors, we can focus corrective actions into those areas which reduce risk to the organization. Error reporting allows the rich information contained in error layers to be consumed by stakeholders. This enables them to gain insight into best practices that can help avoid errors in the future. For example, in organizations that insource data production, this could mean identifying workflows that require additional training or guidance for editors. There are a number of ways that Data Reviewer error layers can be leveraged to generate reports. These include setting up an ArcGIS dashboard, the pop-up feature in ArcGIS Pro. You can symbolize features in your maps using the validation status field of each feature class. And you can use ArcGIS Pro's built-in reporting and charting tools. However, our team has also developed a custom geoprocessing tool to help streamline the charting and error reporting process. Kumar will now demonstrate how information can be extracted from Data Reviewer errors using the geoprocessing tool that our team has developed.
Thank you, Caleb. As Caleb just explained about the importance of reporting, and as the saying goes, a picture worth 1,000 words, I'm going to demonstrate how you can leverage the ArcGIS API for Python to create a dashboard that will provide you a snapshot of your errors and summarizes the accuracy of your data in a report. The goal of this report is to increase awareness of data accuracy that can be leveraged by multiple stakeholders in your organization. In previous demonstrations, you have seen how to leverage error feature in data editing workflows using the ArcGIS Pro Error Inspector. For data editors, this is a great way to interact with errors for the purpose of improving data quality. But sometimes it's necessary to look at data quality a different way. For example, when creating a plan to address data that does not meet an organization's quality requirement, a different tool is needed to help plan the next steps. But because Error Inspector UI is extracting data not just from one feature class, but multiple feature classes and table, because of which this type of filtering and mining is not available as an out-of-the-box functionality. That's why Data Reviewer team created this custom Python script that will query data from different error layers in your geodatabase and create on-the-fly charts and reports that you can save and share with others. This Python script summarizes the result based on the selected input field from all the error layers and then get a distinct count of that field values to generate a dashboard chart. This script is available to everyone in Data Reviewer blogs under Esri community. I would encourage everyone to download and provide suggestions in the blog. So let me show you how this script works. Please follow the instructions on the blog to create a Python script tool in ArcGIS Pro. Simply pass the geodatabase with attribute rules as input. Choose the field based on which you want to create the dashboard chart. Optionally, you can also create a dashboard report and percentage accuracy report, which will give you confidence by seeing the percentage accuracy of individual feature classes. Once you run this script in ArcGIS Pro, a pop-up will appear with a chart that will show you number of errors present in your error layers with a specific field that you opted in the GP tool. In this case, it is showing how many errors of different rule type are present in my database. This pop-up will give you an option to save this chart as a standard picture format. Once saved on disk, you can share this chart with others. Now, let me show you the accuracy report created using this GP script tool. This report will be generated based on the validation status field of each feature class that has attribute rules configured. It will give you details such as how many total features you have in that feature class, and out of those, how many have attribute rule errors associated with them. Using these two values, it calculates the percentage accuracy of that feature class. Margin of error is calculated based on the total number of features which still require validation and has no errors. You can also use the text output of this script in other reporting engines and create a more formal report. So to summarize this demo, we learned how we can use validation status field and GDB error layers to create custom dashboard charts and accuracy report in ArcGIS Pro that can be shared with other stakeholders. Back to you, Caleb.
Thanks, Kumar. Now I'm going to provide a brief recap of our workshop, as well as give you some resources to get you up and running with Data Reviewer. To summarize today's workshop, we started by talking about attribute rules and how Data Reviewer has built upon this powerful capability. We discussed and demonstrated how ArcGIS Data Reviewer can help in implementing quality control processes using both automated and semi-automated workflows such as visual review. Finally, we demonstrated the use of error results that are created during data review to expedite corrective workflows for data editors, as well as how Reviewer can be used to manage, track, and report progress on data quality goals. Information about Data Reviewer can be found on our product page, where you'll find a list of key features and some customer case studies. In addition, if there are any questions or comments that are not addressed in the Q&A following this workshop, please visit the team on Esri Community in the Data Reviewer place. In addition, you can check out our team's blogs, including on the GP tool that Kumar just demonstrated. Documentation for our desktop users can be found on the ArcGIS Pro desktop site. There you'll find documentation for both ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro, as well as tutorials to help get you up and running quickly. For our server customers, documentation can be found on the ArcGIS Enterprise site. There you'll find links to REST and JavaScript APIs, as well as samples, starter applications, and tutorials to get you up and running. While you're there, be sure to read our blog posts, as we've shared a lot of best practices for implementing industry-specific business rules. For information about training courses, please visit the Esri training site, where you'll find a learning plan that includes a series of free training seminars, self-paced web courses, and an instructor-led one-day class that covers implementation basics for Data Reviewer. Thank you for joining us in today's Data Reviewer workshop, and we hope that you stick around for the live Q&A session, which will begin momentarily.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francisco Perez, and I'll be your moderator on today's Q&A session. I am here, though, with our two presenters, Kumar Gaurav and Caleb McNeil. Before we start our Q&A session, I just want to emphasize that we will try to answer all the questions that have been sent our way. If we are not able to answer all these questions within the time frame, rest assured that we will reach out to you either on Slido or directly through the UC 2021 platform. So that being said, given the short time, let's just roll with it. Our first question is, are the processes with Data Reviewer for desktop the same as ArcGIS Pro? Kumar, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, thank you, Francisco. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I can answer this question. And the question is about the processes are same for Data Reviewer for desktop compared to ArcGIS Pro. The processes in ArcGIS Pro are very specific to attribute rules, and attribute rules are specific to feature classes. They bind them together. Attribute rules are supported on feature services, branch version feature services, and file databases. So if you say, are the processes same as you are doing in ArcMap in ArcGIS Pro? Not really. You need to make some modifications, and all the details are available on Web Help. You can go to the Web Help about attribute rules, and you can see what type of modifications you need in your workflows if you're planning to move from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So as for our second question, are the data reviewer checks version specific, as in branch versus traditional? I know there are some questions regarding the capabilities of attribute rules, constraints, calculations, and validation, but in the case of validation for attribute rules with reviewer, Caleb, you want to answer that question?
Sure, thanks, Francisco. So for our services-based workflows, attribute rules are currently available on branch versioned feature services. So if you have a branch versioned feature service workflow, then our checks are definitely available for you. But it should also be noted that Data Reviewer is also just compatible with file geodatabase itself. So you do not necessarily need an enterprise version setup in order to use attribute rules, but it is available with branch versioned feature classes.
All right, so following up, for our next question, with regards to Data Reviewer as part of ArcGIS Pro, do we need to purchase a license as an extension? Kumar, do you want to elaborate more on that?
Yes, please. Data Reviewer is a standard extension on ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Enterprise. So if you want to make use of the branch version feature services workflow, you need a enterprise license for Data Reviewer and desktop license for ArcGIS Pro.
All right. So, okay. So next question: how portable are reviewer attribute rules? Can they be transferred between map templates, for example? Caleb, you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. So there are two different things to keep in mind here. The first is that because these checks are at the database level, they are persisted within a database. So for example, if I were to get a file geodatabase from a colleague, or if I were to get access to a branch version feature service from another organization, say, if they already have attribute rules authored on them, then those attribute rules will be persisted. However, we also have the ability to import and export our rule configurations, which will produce a CSV file with all the different parameters and stuff that you've set up. However, because they are geodatabase specific, there may be a little bit of work there, just making sure that all the fields and stuff that you may be using are also available on the database that you want to import rules on.
All right. So following up the next question, and I believe it's related to the enterprise geodatabase aspect. Will attribute rules be implemented for enterprise geodatabase SQL Server? Kumar, you want to elaborate on that?
Yep. So attribute rules are supported on enterprise databases, but we need to make sure that they're only supported with branch version feature services workflow. So if you're looking for traditional enterprise databases, unfortunately, attribute rules are not supported on them at this time. Attribute rules can also be used with FGDB format if you want to use that. Yeah.
Okay. So our next question, it's kind of a general question, but let's just go through it. When will Data Reviewer in ArcGIS Pro be the same as ArcMap? Caleb or Kumar, you want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. With every new release, we are currently working pretty hard on making sure that all the functionality that was available in our ArcMap workflows are also kind of ported over to the attribute rules workflows. However, we are also taking time to make sure that the checks are still relevant and making some improvements in the workflows, mainly to help our users within that process. So as you'll see in a little bit with Pro 2.9 coming out later this year, we will be adding a lot of new check capabilities. And then, of course, every release continuing on from that, we will have not only equivalence with our Data Reviewer for ArcMap extension, but also some new functionalities.
Awesome. So following question, is it possible to create a rule that will identify duplicate values on a specified field? Kumar, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I can take that question. So Data Reviewer team is currently working on a unique field value check. And as and when that check is going to be available as attribute rule, you can use that check to identify these type of scenarios.
All right, another question that we have is, can I create attribute rules in ArcGIS Data Reviewer for server? Now, if I can elaborate on this one myself, attribute rules are not specific from, are not going to be specific from server. You can execute them from a feature service. You can execute them from a GP service. You can execute them from ArcGIS Pro. Let's see which other questions do we have. Is there a way to add user? No, that was the same question. Oh, this is a different question. Is there a way to add user-defined fields in ArcGIS Pro sessions? Kumar, you want to talk about that?
I can take care of that. So I think the question is about user-defined field in ArcGIS Pro sessions, meaning ArcGIS Reviewer result pane. Recently, I've noticed that an idea has been posted on ArcGIS idea site for Data Reviewer, and we are basically monitoring the idea site, and we will take this as an enhancement if more and more people are asking about this. Unfortunately, this functionality is not available in ArcGIS Pro, but we are looking into it, and this will be available probably in the future releases if lot more users are going to post on Ideas site about this.
All right, so great. Following question, can these rules be incorporated in something like using model builder, meaning attribute reviewer rules? Caleb, you want to talk about that?
Sure. So currently, what you can do with things such as model builder or even a standalone script, you can definitely execute the rules that are already offered. However, right now, we don't have a way to author rules per se. However, in the future, we're hoping to add some more geoprocessing capabilities to be able to add rules, which of course that would be able to be incorporated into some sort of model. But currently, yeah, it's just the execution of the rules that can be automated in that way.
All right, so there was a question that we already answered with regards to what's the difference with geodatabase topology and say data reviewer. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more on that. There are some overlaps between data reviewer and what geodatabase topology does in terms of feature integrity. However, data reviewer does not alterate your production data the way that geodatabase topology does. Geodatabase topology can allow you to fix issues in your productional data, such as slivers or gaps. But you need to be watchful with the type of tolerance that you're using when you are playing with topology, because you might be able to alterate the boundaries of productional data. Data reviewer is never going to do that. Reviewer is never going to edit your data. Reviewer has equal capabilities as geodatabase topology. It will be able to find these errors. It will be able to generate geometric errors based on this data, spatial data inconsistencies, but it will not be altering your productional data. Now, let's see. Do we have anything else? Let's see if we have any other questions that we have not addressed in our live session. Let's see. Why doesn't the QC person just fix the error when it finds it? I mean, you can have in your organization multiple multiple users having multiple roles. You can have a QA, a QC appointed person also fixing the error. It kind of goes along with our story with automated data validation. It depends on the organization, but sure, you can do it. Reviewer can be a scalable application, whether you have a small group. You can assign the QA person to also be, as long as this person is familiar with the nature of the error being found, these errors can be fixed. And eventually, once you get to reevaluate your area using attribute validation rules, you should be able to see the automated phase and status change in play with our new automated validation. Let's see, which other questions do we have? Our time is, I think we have room for a few more questions. Is there a document available showing what rule in ArcMap Data Reviewer is also available in ArcGIS Pro 2.8 and 2.9? Kumar, you want to talk about that?
So the question is about for a document which is showing kind of the comparison between this functionality is available and this. Yes, right. You can actually look into the data reviewer poster, which will allow you to see what different checks are available and different checks in terms of geodabases, in terms of feature classes. You can compare which functionality is available as an attribute check or a map rule check, and you can implement those checks accordingly in the respective workflows.
You can also, if you want to compare between different versions, another kind of easy way is within the Pro documentation, there's a what's new section that we will usually list if we've added any new functionality there. So yeah, check out the ArcGIS documentation.
Yeah, I can only emphasize on that myself. I think the reviewer poster, where the latest reviewer poster that shows the differences between checks that have been there since ArcMap versus ArcGIS Pro is a great resource for everybody to understand which reviewer capability is now available as an attribute validation rule versus previous versions of the software. Now, with that said, I think we are in the wrap-up mode now, given the fact that we have only a few minutes. I myself, I want to, on behalf of Caleb Kumar, myself, and the reviewer team, we want to thank you for joining us. And please feel free to keep asking questions. We will reach out to you if we didn't answer your questions during this particular time frame. Also, I believe we're providing some links that will allow you to provide some feedback to us. It's always good information that we use to move forward in every conference. Your feedback is also, it's always great value. So for that, I want to thank you for your attendance on today's session, and we hope that you have a great users conference.